Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat, in which we will keep working with how to respond to risk of material misstatement. In the prior session, we focused specifically on controls because remember, one line of defense is the controls that the company have, and the other line of defense is the substantive testing in dealing with risk of material misstatement. In the prior session, we focused on test of controls, and specifically we covered the nature, extent, and timing for the testing of controls. Now, the second line of defense, or the other one, is the substantive testing, which we will discuss in the next session. In this session, we want to know, after we test control and we have the results, how do we evaluate those results? But real quick, we need to review real quick first about when do we test control. Remember, two conditions. This is a review. If we plan to rely on the control, in other words, the control risk is assessed or set below maximum, we plan to rely. You don't test if you're not going to rely, or the substantive procedures alone are not enough. And when is that reality exist? It exists when the client's system relies heavily on IT system, on information system, where the evidence is electronic. What we have to do now, we have to check not only the output of the system, we have to check the code, the pipelines where that information is generated. So simply understanding how control are designed will not be enough. We will need to test the control under those circumstances. But in this session specifically, we will focus on, okay, now we did the testing, we have the results, how to evaluate the results. Let's go ahead and get started. Before we proceed any further, I have a public announcement about my company, farhatlectures.com. Most students and CPA candidates struggle not because audit is too hard, but because it's taught fast and the logic behind the procedure isn't explained clearly. Then everything feels disconnected. At Farhat Lectures, we break audit down step by step. We explain the why behind the standards, the logic behind the assertions, risks, procedures, evidence, so the whole process finally clicks. When the concepts connect, audit becomes clear and manageable. You stop memorizing and start understanding. Ready for auditing to make sense? Start your free trial at farhatlectures.com. Result of test of control. Here's what's going to happen. After testing, we're going to form a conclusion or whether we can rely on the controls or not. So either yes or no. Case one is we can rely. If we can rely, it means controls are operating effectively. If controls are effective, what can we do as an auditor? We can set the control risk below maximum. What does that mean? This is going to lead to less substantive testing. So we need to do less work, less extensive, cheaper. Why? Because we have good internal control. Case one, internal control is working properly. This is the assumption here. So detection risk might be set higher. Why can we set detection risk higher? Because we already have mitigating control. In other words, we can take more chances. Why? Because we have a line of defense called the internal control of the business. We are comfortable with auditing the company. Therefore, we can set detection risk higher because the controls are better. So for example, if cash disbursement approval are consistently functioning, the auditor might set fewer disbursement transaction for authorization. We might test less of those. Why? Because the controls are working properly. We can do what? Test less, do less field work when it comes to cash disbursement. What is the second case? The second case is the controls are not operating effectively. If testing reveals control failure, well, what do we have to do now? We either test if there's any alternative or compensating control. Now, in small companies, and when I did audit, we did audit mostly for small companies. And in small companies, the owner is always there. The owner is reviewing everything. So the owner is a compensating control. Why? Because the owner, if the control is not working, the owner checks everything. Why? Because that's their money, that's their business. But this is talking about small business, and this is what I had the most experience in. But in large companies, you might have some other alternative compensating control that, okay, if the controls are not working, there's an alternative control. Or
The other one, what we do is we increase substantive testing. In other words, we do more work. So we have to do more work. We have to select a larger sample, more detailed testing, more field work. It's going to cost us more money. It's going to cost us more time. We're going to have to bring experienced auditor because the controls are not working. Risk is going up. So if sales invoices are not always matched to ship and document, the auditor might perform direct confirmation with customers instead. Why? Because they cannot rely on your controls. I need external documentation. This is what we mean by increased substantive testing. Now, we have to understand the type of control deficiencies. And remember, in the prior session, we said we have to differentiate between design deficiency and operating deficiency. Well, same thing. When we are looking at the controls, we could say the design is deficient, or it's the operating effectiveness is not working properly, is deficient. So what's design deficiency? Design deficiency means what? It means the way the control is on paper, the way it's designed, it's not proper. It's missing preventive measure or poorly designed and cannot prevent or detect misstatement by its design. Like what? For example, they would have no segregation of duties between recording and approving payment, or lack of password protection in the accounting system. Just simply put, the way it's designed, it's just poor. It's a poor design. It's not doing its job. Or operating deficiency. It's not working properly. The design is good, but it's not working properly. And we're going to see a few examples of both. The control do exist. It's on paper good, but it's not executed properly or consistently. So for example, we say we do reconciliation. Well, reconciliation are required monthly, but were skipped for 3 months. Well, it is designed to do it every month, but if we're not performing that every month, then there is a problem in the operating deficiency of the design. Let's look at some common examples that deals with the design flaws for an internal control system. The first one we're going to discuss is one of the main one, or the one that's quoted the most, is lack of segregation of duties. For example, the same individual that handles cash receipts also record the cash. Remember the ARC, and if you don't remember it, we're going to talk about it later. Authorization of something, of the asset, should be separate from recording, should be separate from custody. So people that can give authorization to something, they cannot record that something, and they cannot have access to it. Those three has to be separated. So lack of segregation is a big design flaw. If you see, it's in the design, they don't have the segregation. In the ARC, again, we'll talk about that later, but segregation of duties is a big one. Also, they don't have IT access control, inadequate. Anyone can change vendor master file. For example, if any individual can go into the system and add a vendor to the system, then what's going to happen is you're going to add your friends, your relatives, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, to do what? So they are a vendor, and we're going to issue check. There's a risk of issuing check to them. So why? Because we don't have good control over who can access the vendor master files. Or a poor design is we don't have qualified people. Staff preparing financial statements lack proper training. They don't understand GAAP. They don't understand where things should go. Or they're not familiar with the disclosure. Or there is no monitoring mechanism, because one of the important function of internal control is a review, monitoring. If that's missing, that's a design flaw. If it's not there, it's a problem by itself. Now, what are some examples of operating failure? Remember, operating failures, it means it's not working properly. Well, for example, we have a policy where the managers review purchase order. Well, if the managers failed to review, that's an operating failure because the authorization is skipped. Or if management can override certain transaction, if the CEO can manually approve transaction above policy limit, then that's an operating failure. Why? Because they're overriding the control. Employee bias or fraud. What does that mean? It means the individual working in the system, themselves, they are conducting the fraud. Or if we find too many deviation rate, too many errors, too many exceptions in the control sample tested. Now, when we're going to see later, when we test, we would assume, for example, we're going to see 3% exceptions or deviation. If we found 10%, well, there's a problem in the operating of the control. Why? Because too many mistakes. It's not working properly. Or there's a communication failure where the accounting system failed to alert management of late payment. Just the system is not working properly. There's an operating failure. Now, how do auditors respond to deficiencies? Well, what would the auditor have to do when deficiencies are identified? Well, when they are noted, first we have to identify whether we have a compensating control. Because if there's a deficiency, the first thing we look for is the owner there to compensate, or do we have a compensating control? A strong monthly reconciliation may offset daily reviews. So if we don't do daily reviews, that's fine. But if we have monthly reconciliation, it might offset that problem. So the monthly reconciliation is a compensation. Now, let's assume we are supposed to do monthly reconciliation, but we don't, but we do quarterly. The quarterly might compensate for skipping that monthly. Then we have to do is assess the severity of the deficiency. Now we're going to introduce two terms. Don't worry about them now. We're going to cover them later in separate recording. One is significant deficiency. Is this a significant deficiency? If it's a significant, means important enough, it has to be reportable to those charged with governance. Or is it a material weakness where we have to issue it in the report? Public disclosure required for issuer. Again, depending on the deficiency, then we'll talk about that later on when we issue the internal control report later on, but something that we have to deal with. Then we have to consider the potential misstatement risk. If there's a problem, what is the probability of that problem occurring? That's one. What's the probability? Two, what is the effect? What's the magnitude of that error? Because we have to take into account both. What is the percentage of it happening? And if that happened, what is the magnitude, the dollar amount that's going to lead to the misstatement and the financial statement? And obviously, the response would be what? Also what we have to do as auditors, adjust the net, nature, extent, and timing. Increase the extent of the substantive procedures, such as confirmation, recalculation, or analytical testing. Whatever we have to do, we have to go back and readjust. Quick example to put all this lecture together in one example. For example, we have a control that dual authorization for payment over $50,000. Every time we need to make a payment over $50,000, we need two signatures to be listed. That's great. Some payment were approved by only one manager. Well, that's a violation. Well, we need to assess whether we have another control. What could be another control? Because remember, the first thing is there another control? This control is not working. Do they have something else to compensate? Well, yeah. The Treasury will review it. Well, technically, if the Treasury reviews it, we have to kind of say, okay, we have a compensating control. Or we're going to have to increase the substantive testing for larger payments because it looks like they're not following their own policies, which is what? Dual authorization, two signature for these payment. What we need to understand when it comes to internal control is control testing is not a one-time checkbox because each result affects the nature, timing, and extent. How does it affect the testing of the control itself? And eventually, how does it affect substantive procedure? Because the whole reason we are testing, we are relying on the control is to do what? Is to reduce the substantive procedures. If we have a good line of defense at the control, we have a good line of defense, therefore we can reduce substantive procedure. Let's take a look at this multiple choice question from farhatlectures.com. The company's account receivable clerk has authority to both approve credit and post write-off. What type of control deficiency does this represent? So I'm telling you right now, this is a deficiency, period. I'm telling you this is a deficiency. And what's the deficiency here? I hope you can see this. It's segregation of duties. Now, if you're taking this question on farhatlectures.com and you just don't understand what they are talking about here in the question, immediately you could ask the AI to explain the topic. Then it'll explain to you what is a control deficiency and what's happening here without, if you want to just kind of review the topic. Then you can go back and answer the question. Well, let's start with the none. This is a compensating control. No, it's not a compensating control. It's a control deficiency and it's a lack of segregation of duties. Is it operating deficiency, design deficiency, or documentation deficiency? Let's eliminate the easy one. Documentation, they're not saying anything. Most likely they're telling you here they have the authority to both approve the credit and do the write-off. Most likely they find that out from documentation. We have nothing to do with documentation deficiency. Here we have to choose between, is it an operating deficiency or a design deficiency? Guess what? It's a problem in the design. Why? Because the problem is there's this individual that can do both. You're given the same clerk, the same accounting clerk, approve the credit. It means they can sell to anyone. And when they can sell to anyone, they're going to increase sales. And they have the right to also do the write-off. So they can increase sales, write them off as nothing happened. And post write-off is important because also you can pocket the receipts of money. If you can do post write-off, then you have the option to do what? To make the sale and write it off for an individual. Like for example, your friend, you can approve a sales on credit for them. Tell them, don't worry, we're going to approve you for $500,000 or $100,000 sale. You can turn around and write off, remove that receivable from the record. That's a problem. There's segregation of duties, and that's in the design itself. Now, it doesn't mean this individual is doing so. Just by the design, it's deficient. Now, if we find out that they are doing so, it's obviously operating deficiency, and it's more than that. It's fraud, but we're not even there. But it's in the design, we have a problem. Now, on farhatlectures.com, you could ask the AI to explain the correct answer if you don't like the answer choices. And you can ask AI to create a similar MCQ for you. The key is to learn the material. By learning the material, practicing, using AI as your tutor, assistant, hand by hand on farhatlectures.com, this is what we do. We help you get going, whether you are a CPA exam candidate or an accounting student. Invest in yourself. That's the best investment you can make. Good luck and peace.